This is the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I'm Franco Terrazzano, Federal Director, and we're always fighting for lower taxes, less waste, more accountable government. Today I'm joined by our Quebec Director, Nicolas Gagnon, and we're going to talk about one of the most wasteful areas of the federal government. Okay, it is the Governor General. It's Rideau Hall. They have been wasting money like crazy. Then we're going to get in some polling, some good news showing that Canadians are sick and tired of the Governor General and Rideau Hall's bureaucrats living high on the hog on your tax dollars. So, Nicholas, let's get right into it. Talk to us about some of the crazy waste of money going on with the Governor General and Rideau Hall.
Well, there's been quite a good number of expense scandal at Rideau Hall over the last couple of decades, maybe with Adrienne Clarkson, Michael Jean, Danielle Johnson, or even Julie Payette, and now more recently, Madame Mary Simon. So there have been a couple of scandals, and many of them have actually been very much covered thanks to our work at the CTF over the last couple of years. And I think that I have my three top favorites in terms of scandals that really have completely changed the way that people perceive what Rideau Hall is actually doing for taxpayers. The first one, and that was one of the top story of 2022, is when we learned, thanks to some access to information that we filed at the CTF, that Mary Simon, with her delegation, while traveling to the Middle East in 2022, spent close to $100,000 on food catering in a little less than a week.
Yeah,
So
airplane food. Airplane food. It was 100 grand on airplane food.
exactly. So close to $100,000 for a couple of, we're talking between 40 and 50 people for the entire delegation during that travel over 1 week. So that was one of the worst wastes coming from Rideau Hall in a long time. But that does not really
Wait,
come close
Nicholas,
to my,
Nicholas.
yes,
Sorry. Let me just interject there for a second. We're
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
get on because remember, folks, this was like a huge scandal, right? And when the news first broke that the Governor General and her entourage spent 100K on airplane food, they were dragged into committee, and some of the bureaucrats were like, "Oh no, these were like normal food, right? We had eggs, we had omelet," and the members of Parliament were like questioning these bureaucrats, being like, "Well, what did you actually spend the money on, right? How'd you spend 100K on airplane food? Show us the receipts." And the bureaucrats were like, "Oh, we can't give you the receipts. We don't have them." But the problem with that is that the CTF, we had the receipts and we were feeding the receipts to the media, right? So the next day, members of parliament saw on the front pages, right, that like, no, it wasn't normal airplane food. They were having like beef Wellington with ragu on this airplane. And now, Nicholas, I don't know about you, but you can't even get like beef Wellington flavored chips on a normal airplane, let alone the real deal. So anyways, a little tangent, folks, really paint some color on how crazy that spending was. Nicholas, what's some of the other crazy expenses coming from the Governor General?
Well, if you think that's crazy, well, wait for the next one because that's definitely my favorite. When in 2023, if I'm not mistaken, Mary Simon and her delegation again traveled to Iceland, and this time they spent $71,000 for ice limos, also known as limousine, so that they could be driving around the city for a couple of days while they were staying there. Now, the big story is they spent $71,000 for less than 3 days while they were staying in Iceland. And the worst part is they were there for a conference about climate change, but the conference center was nearly 700 meters away from the hotel where Mary Simon and her delegation were staying for the entire travel. So they actually stayed approximately 70 hours in Iceland for the entire travel there. And they spent $71,000 for ice limo service for not even driving more than a couple of minutes away from where they were staying. So that was is quite crazy. Actually, I think that you came up with that calculation before, where in the end we could have bought literally an entirely new BMW, like from the
Yeah.
from the year, and just abandon it at the airport, and it would have been cheaper for taxpayers than what we spent for her and her delegation to drive around in ice limo. So that was quite one of the craziest story, and also, and that was even worse. My third and most favorite one as well is when we learned that they spent at Rideau Hall up to $117,000 for dry cleaning services. That's
Oh.
a bit maybe with Julie Payette as the Governor General, or with Mary Simon or anyone else. We learned that they spend that kind of money while they actually had the staff at Rideau Hall to take care of all the clothing. And that's just on top of the fact that the Governor General has access to an expense account for a $130,000 for clothing over an entire 5 years mandate. So despite having the staff, despite having all of the expense that was able to cover such spendings, they actually still went out of their ways to spend $117,000 for dry cleaning services. So that's the kind of stories that we dig in Rideau Hall, and that's just over the last 2 years alone. With Mary Simon, there's so many other stories that we have dig before with Julie Payette, with Michael Jean, and others. The expenses account from Adrienne Clarkson after she left the office. So yeah, there's been quite a lot of scandals at Rideau Hall, and hopefully we will see the end of it one day.
Yeah, and like, look, like you mentioned, look, you're so right that the pay, the perks, the expenses for Governor General should have been reined in a long time ago, right? This isn't just about Simon, it's about the position and all the waste that we've seen over the years. Now, you mentioned some of these expenses, crazy, the airplane food, the ice limos in Iceland. Look, the salary of a Governor General, they're taking a salary increase every single year, like members of Parliament. The Governor General's salary is now, what, $378,000. But it's not just the cost of taxpayers when the Governor General is actually in office. Nicholas, talk about some of the crazy perks that a Governor General gets after they leave office.
So yes, Mary Simon, as any other predecessors in her office, actually have access to quite crazy perks. Now, yes, she has access to a $378,000 salary, which is quite crazy when you consider the very few things that she has to accomplish in that office. But also, she has, as soon as she leave office, she will receive a $150,000 annual pension for the rest of her life, to which is added also a $200,000 expense account that, yes, is also accessible to her or to her families even 6 months after she is deceased. And that's the case for all of the other governor generals as well who has been in that office. And we actually made some calculations before, and all the cost of all the pensions of all the current living former governor generals is going to cost taxpayers up to 19, close to 19 millions of dollars if they all reach the age of 90 years old. So that's quite a lot of money. And so that's the kind of perks that they have access to right after they leave office. And that doesn't change if they stay there for 1 or 2 years or less than 4 years, like it was the case for Julie Payette, or maybe they do the full term. They still have access to perks that are quite inaccessible for the vast majority of Canadian taxpayers.
Oh, that's crazy. So let me just reiterate, okay? So you get an annual pension, regardless of how long you serve. That's about 150 grand a year. Okay, that's crazy. And then, folks, I don't know if you heard that, but on top of that, in addition to that, maybe it's the craziest government perk I've ever heard of, and that's saying a lot because there's a lot of crazy ones out there, that a former governor general can expense up to $200,000 every single year for the rest of their lives and even 6 months after their deaths. Crazy. Absolutely crazy. All right, Nicholas. So look, we've talked about some of the crazy perks for governors general, but let's get into some of the good news, right? That Canadians are sick and tired of this extravagance and they want the government to cut back the governor general's budget. So why don't you talk about that poll that we commissioned to give our listeners and our viewers some actual good news here?
Yes, so we actually commissioned a poll with Leger to actually know what's going on, what Canadian taxpayers think about the budget that is given to Rideau Hall on an annual basis. It's important to remind people that all of those perks combined, all of those costs come up to the amount of approximately 36 millions of dollars. That's how much taxpayers have been paying for all of the service and the institution of the governor general itself, including the salaries and the other perks that we just talked about. So we did that poll to actually know what people want to do with those perks. Should we actually rein in those perks? Should we put an end to them? Should we, or should we say, should we reduce that budget for the governor general? And so far, so good. 49% of Canadians believe that it's time to cut the governor general's budget, and that's a very good news because when you look at the rest of the numbers, you realize that only 19% of Canadians believe that we should maintain status quo. Approximately 13% of Canadians believe that we should actually increase that budget. I would very much love to have a discussion with those folks to understand the whole thinking there. But there's still a good 19% of the people that were talked to or that were questioned about it, and they just said basically that they don't know. So if you just take the people that really have their mind set about this matter, it's 60% of Canadians who believe it's time to cut the Governor General's budget, which is so it really demonstrates that Canadians are fed up with this entire privileged circus that is happening at Rideau Hall. And it's actually a very good thing in terms of timing, because it's important to remind people that Prime Minister Mark Carney and his Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne have recently announced that they want to reduce spendings from the federal government. So if they're really serious about it, well, and that's the whole point here, they should actually start somewhere where we clearly see a lot of scandals, a lot of spendings that don't make any sense to common taxpayers. So it's time to really cut the Governor General's budget. Canadian taxpayers are on board with this.
Yeah, so look, the bad news, Governor General, the whole bureaucracy over there at Rideau Hall, wasting your money like crazy. The good news is that Canadians are fed up. Canadians want some spending cuts. And like, look, as I always say, right, regardless of where you stand on the question of the monarchy and Canadian taxpayers, like regardless of where you stand, whether you're against the monarchy, whether you're in favor of it, I think all Canadians should be against this type of waste. Right? Like when we're talking about like almost 100K for airplane food, 71 grand limo service, or just this one, that a former governor general can expense taxpayers for up to $200,000 for the rest of their lives and up to 6 months after their death. Like that's crazy. Like that's crazy. So regardless of where you stand on the monarchy issue, I think all Canadians should be in favor of cutting the clear waste at Rideau Hall, right? That should have been reined in long ago. So Nicholas, thanks for outlining some of the crazy waste and some of the good news in terms of polling showing that Canadians are fed up. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're fed up with all this waste like Nicholas and I am, head over to taxpayer.com, sign the petition to rein in the perks for governors general.